Welcome back. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has told the United Nations General Assembly that trade is now being used as a quote-unquote weapon against a number of countries in an ostensible rebuke of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. President Ramaphosa also spoke about potential reforms that need to occur not only within the General Assembly, but also within the UN Security Council. But a lot of the messaging has been with regards to ending the genocide in Gaza and, of course, holding the government of Israel to account. Joining me now to break down these discussions, I'd like to welcome Dr. Oscar Van Heerden, who is at the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Van Heerden, always good having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Firas.
Yeah.
And thanks to you. Yes.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Dr. Van Heerden, I mean, the discussion of trade, I think it's always been a hot topic, but also given that at this very moment, you've got Minister Park Star, who's in New York to try and cut a trade deal with the U.S. officials. But in your view, the messaging from President Ramaphosa with regards to, using this platform to have a little bit of a jive at Trump on this tariff scenario?
Yeah, no, I think that President Ramaphosa did a calculated move. It was quite clear, we always hear about the fact that if you don't stand up against Trump, he will undermine you, he will try and make a fool of you. And I think that this is a calculated move by President Ramaphosa, the right platform, which is the United Nations, in which he is reminding President Trump that weaponizing trade, coming up with sanctions and bully tactics with high tariffs, etc., is damaging to the world economy and to world trade. And that's not how one should be proceeding when there is developmental priorities and trying to do good out there for various countries. And I think that the president just decided to, drop the gauntlet and say this is not how a mature and respectable partners operate.
Yeah, and I think also Dr. Van Heerden added to that, President Ramaphosa would have not just gotten support from the BRICS nations, but also, many of the developing nations who themselves have been hit with quite high tariffs. I mean, notably India, of course, they've been hit with over 50%, according to Trump. This is because, obviously, India is purchasing crude oil from Russia at a cheaper price. So, again, you talk of calculating move. Ramaphosa would have known that using this as a platform to deliver this message would have had the support, not just from BRICS nations, but other developing nations also.
That's absolutely correct. He knew. And we see it. We see the number of countries in the global south that is echoing similar sentiments that Ramaphosa has been outlining, because it is just evident that first the United States decided to weaponize the US dollar, and hence there is a move by many countries to try and say that they need to de-dollarize. It's not because they don't want to operate with the dollar, but the US decided to weaponize it. Similarly now, with the weaponization of trade and tariffs and sanctions, it is forcing countries to look elsewhere, to look at other partners and so forth. And Ramaphosa is saying that this is your doing.
Doctor, let's talk about reforms that President Ramaphosa has been speaking about. A lot of it is, looking to try and get many more developing nations within to have a larger voice within the UN General Assembly. But most importantly, that of the UN Security Council. We've had 6 times where the US has vetoed a Gaza ceasefire. Are we at a stage 80 years on from this formation of the UN General Assembly of the United Nations as a whole, that we are going to be seeing developing nations having a much bigger voice, both in the General Assembly and the UN Security Council?
One of the things that has come to the fore quite clearly for us is that the United Nations are seen as a toothless institution, particularly with regards to an active, ongoing genocide taking place in Gaza, perpetrated by the State of Israel and the Netanyahu government. A lot of platitudes, a lot of words, but nothing tangible and concrete because of how the UN has been set up post-World War II. And as you say, one of the permanent members, constantly, regardless of the violations of international law, international humanitarian law, the very grave situation within Gaza and the West Bank increasingly. And yet one member can just constantly use and abuse the veto and shield the state of Israel. And I think the United Nations, the Secretary General Guterres, everyone knows that if it continues like this, if there is such disregard for international law and for the UN Charter, both on genocide and on other issues, then there's no point in having a United Nations. And if the US wants to go down that road, then the countries are going to just simply move away from the UN.
Yeah, Dr. Van Heerden, what was interesting with President Donald Trump's speech is that he had a little bit of a dig at the United Nations, and of course, just later on, he decided to say, you know what, let me try and smooth this off and meet with Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General. But I mean, he himself actually having a dig at the United Nations, I found that to be unprecedented. I just wanted to get your take on it, Dr. Van Heerden, because it's quite rare that you see somebody as powerful as Donald Trump, the head of the country who sits at the White House, at that Oval Office, taking a dig at the very same institution that is centered in his country.
It is no surprise. We have what we call in the international relations theory, these realists. And realists believe that the world is anarchic. There is no supreme international body that can actually control that anarchy. And so they have no regard for multilateralism, for multilateral institutions, and for United Nations structures. This is basically the position that Trump was outlining in his speech. He sees no relevance for the UN. It's all about him and his country, and they will maintain world peace, and they will maintain cooperation in trade and so forth, and there's no role for the UN. It is very disturbing, and I think the United Nations and the General Assembly is responding to that. This is about the fight and future of the United Nations. When the country like the US begins to violate the rules and deny certain people visas to come to the UN, when there is a special arrangement in place for those who attend the General Assembly, because even though those buildings are in New York and in the United States, it is actually sovereign territory. And when you have a belligerent host, such as the US, who now even tell you that you are useless, then it's time to think about moving out of that country.
Before we go to the break, Dr. Van Heerden, how much of the strength of South Africa's G20 presidency did Ramaphosa use to deliver this message, and probably in the sternest of ways, given that, of course, what South Africa is trying to do within this G20 presidency is really create and deepen the idea of multilateralism?
It was the clash of these two ideological positions, if you like. And that's why I'm saying that President Ramaphosa was very calculated. He took to the platform, he took to the stage. He is the president of the G20 at this particular point in time. And what Trump is advocating for, and his administration, both in Russia, Ukraine, both in Israel, Gaza, but also the weaponization of the dollar and trade, is running counter to what the message and the sustainability is that he wants to promote with the G20. And he spoke in that authority. He's saying that there are this clash, and we cannot continue like this.
After the break, I'll continue my conversation with Dr. Oscar Van Heerden. We're going to be touching on, obviously, the messaging, most of the messaging, many of the nations saying it is time to end the genocide in Gaza. But while, obviously, this messaging is happening, the brutal bombardments, especially on camps for displaced residents of Gaza, continues to occur. And of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa led that message for not just the end of the genocide, not only for the creation of the two-state solution, but also to hold the Israeli leaders account. Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant still have ICC arrest warrants on their heads. After the break, my conversation continues. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, part of the discussions within the UN General Assembly was to establish the two-state solution, overwhelming support for it to occur, and of course the recognition of a Palestinian state, which of course the discussions led by French President Emmanuel Macron and of course the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. But a lot of the focus was, of course, on President Cyril Ramaphosa, given that South Africa had, of course, launched the ICJ case against Israel, for him to come on to the podium at the General Assembly and, of course, deliver a stunning rebuttal of Israel's conduct that is currently occurring in Gaza. Again, staying with me, Dr. Oscar Van Heerden from the University of Johannesburg. Doc, the message from President Ramaphosa, it had to come from him, given, of course, that he has led South Africa in this ICJ case against Israel.
Indeed, it had to come from him. He was the right person to make the call, and it was necessary for South Africa and, of course, the Global South to come out very clear, because this notion that Palestinians can be treated as subhuman, that their lives don't matter, that there is not a outcry and action being taken to stop this act of genocide taking place, is what he was highlighting and saying that it cannot continue. Not only must there be accountability for the Israeli officials and the Israeli government, but also the world needs to act.
Yeah. Dr. Van Heerden, and that's the thing, we've seen a number of nations really coming out, number one, just not only condemning Israel, but also at the same time really calling for the Gaza ceasefire to occur. How important is President Ramaphosa, given that we are just under 2 months away from the official leaders summit, for him to maintain this message, also to say more pressure needs to be put, especially on the United States, which still at this very moment continues to support Israel in this genocide that is occurring. And it's not just occurring in Gaza. We see settler attacks given the green light by the Israeli army to go ahead and continue eating up much more land within the occupied West Bank.
For us, this is a moment in history where your principles matter. There's a reason why South Africa took the decision to take the Israeli state to the ICJ on the charges of genocide. There needs to be accountability. And even though there is now the Leaders Summit coming in the G20, he needs to draw the line in the sand, and I think he has, as President Ramaphosa. He's saying that if you don't want to come to the G20 Leaders Summit because you want to boycott because of the actions we've taken and the decisions that we principally took, then so be it. We are not going to be party or condoning or being complicit to an act of genocide that's happening on the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. It's just not going to happen. And, the United States is obviously going to say they are not coming. And other European countries might decide the same. But for now, most countries have confirmed that they are coming. We'll see whether Trump, seems to me, doesn't ever want to come to the continent of Africa. He'll probably send J.D. Vance because Marco Rubio himself, very, very pro-Zionist, doesn't want to hear anything about South Africa. So, it's a very tough situation. I wish Minister Tau all the best with trying to get a trade deal out of them. But they're hell-bent on punishing us and bullying us because we are the junior partner of BRICS, and they can. So we'll have to see. I think that we need to remain resolute with our principles around our solidarity for the people of Palestine.
Yeah. Dr. Van Heerden, as we speak right now, Mahmoud Abbas is delivering a message, it's going to be done via video. Quite unfortunate. And I know the Palestinian Authority has a lot of detractors with regards to, the way they've come into power. But I mean, that's a subject for another day. But the fact that you've got a high-ranking Palestinian official that is going to, of course, be delivering, a message on the back of many nations calling for a two-state solution or the recognition of a Palestinian state. This idea of recognizing, a Palestinian state, I mean, surely this should have been done a long time ago, Dr. Van Heerden. I mean, to many people, this is seen as sort of a knee-jerk reaction, given that Western countries may find themselves in a situation of complicity, given its support for Israel, not just since October the 7th, but even prior to that. prior to that, I beg your pardon.
No, you absolutely. So the matter here is that in terms of the PR, the public relations and so on, it's of course important that these countries come out very clear for the first time in many, many decades that they are now supporting a state of Israel, a state of Palestine. But the truth of the matter is it is placates. It comes at a time when they have been complicit in actively supporting this genocide. And it seems that they want to now sort of wash their hands of the guilt. So, we will welcome, of course, the announcement that they support the state of Palestine. They've always been supportive of the two-state solution, and the words in itself says two-state solution. So one would have thought that they would have always supported the state of Palestine. But we accept that they've come out clear. They want to be seen to be on the right side of history. Now, if they really want to recognize the state of Palestine, then there must be something left of Palestine.
Yeah.
And so they need to now stop supporting the state of Israel, stop giving them weapons, stop giving them money and aid, and stop justifying this genocide that's happening. Unless that happens, concrete action happens, then recognizing the state of Palestine is just another meaningless words.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it, Dr. Van Heerden? I was speaking to a Palestinian journalist in the occupied West Bank on Tuesday, and her concern was that this is just seen as a PR exercise, because if there's a delay, you're mentioning what state is there left for the people of Palestine, because land continually is being annexed by these settlers, again, backed by the Israeli army. You've got individuals like Ben Gvir and Smotrich who have come out clearly and said, we will take the land. You've got Benjamin Netanyahu saying that we will continue to take even more land from the occupied West Bank. I mean, this really just shows that it's a race against time. And I'd like to think, and I'm going to get your take on this, Dr. Van Heerden, that many of the Western nations are on sleep mode right now, especially what is happening in the occupied West Bank, because if that land continues to get taken, then there really is no state of Palestine to speak about.
Well, we must make a slight correction for us. It's not the nations that are asleep; it's the governments.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we've seen many hundreds of thousands of people in Italy, in Spain, in the United Kingdom, in the US, in Australia. And so on. Hundreds of thousands of people saying that this genocide must end. They want their government to act, but the governments are the ones that are not listening. So, and I think to a certain extent, they are also worried about the groundswell that's taking place on the streets of Berlin and London and Paris and so on. And that's why they want to placate and talk about now recognizing the state of Palestine. That groundswell is not going to stop. The flotilla is on its way. Spain and Italy has now sent ships to protect, because the Israelis are wanting to intimidate and so forth and harm some of the people that's part of the flotilla. The world is turning against Israel. And Ramaphosa was reminding President Trump and the Israelis to heed the call of the international community. Otherwise, they must face the consequences.
One final question, Dr. Van Heerden. Come UNGA 81, are we going to be having these same discussions with regards to global security, or could there be a change? Dr. Van Heerden, your response? Dr. Van Heerden, can you hear me?
I'm hoping there's going to be a change for us. I hope that the change is there.
Okay, no, you can continue, Doc.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can continue, Doctor, with your answer.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
I see I've frozen on your screen.
No problem. No, you can continue, Doctor.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Please continue with your answer.
I do hope that it's going to be a change. I hope that we are going to see an end to the genocide with this year still. I hope that Israel and its ethnic cleansing plan is not going to work. And I hope that there's going to be sufficient pressure from European and the global South countries to actually begin to say that there needs to be a ceasefire and we need to find an amicable, lasting solution for the peoples of Palestine. And that is a two-state solution.
Dr. Oscar Van Heerden, always good having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's Dr. Oscar Van Heerden, who is from the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg. Well, we're not stopping at UJ because I'm going to be speaking to Kofi Kwakwa with regards to Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They've pulled out from the International Criminal Court. How big is that, given that they are the three major nations from the Sahel region? My conversation continues after the break.